Welcome to the latest edition of the Vic State Cricket Podcast. I'm Adam White and I'm joined by David Saker, and it is so good to have Sakes on our podcast because, he's sort of half the time in Australia, half the time in the UK at the moment. David, welcome.
Yeah, it's good to be here, and I've obviously watched some of them, so I'm hoping I can add to it.
Oh, I'm sure you will, because it's such an interesting story, both as a player and as a coach. What's it like coming back to Australia, having just been part of the Ashes with the enemy? You're allowed back in, everyone sort of accepts you. Now you put the Renegade stuff back on?
Yeah, well, it's obviously, I've been in both camps, and I've been in the English camp twice, so it's, I think I never really look at it as betraying Australia. I've never got the opportunity to sort of play for Australia one, and then I was lucky enough to go and work with England first time, and then when I came back, I ended up with the Australian team. So to me, it's just a job, and it's like anyone's job. If you get the good opportunities, especially international sport, you've got to take it. So the great thing about the Ashes just gone, it was such a great Ashes, and I was in a great seat. So it was more just watching it as a spectator than a coach. It was one of the most exciting Ashes you'll ever see.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. We'll talk about that later on, just to be able to work with the likes of Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad, two of the most successful players of all time. I'm fascinated to hear more about that. But I want to know how did you get into cricket? Because you're part of a very passionate cricket family. Your dad's very famous in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. He's got a ground named after him. So I would imagine that's where the love of the game came from. But growing up, what did cricket mean to you?
It's pretty much everything, really. Particularly in the summer months, we were just a normal family in the suburbs, but we had a street full of young kids. The Saker family was the go-to for cricket down the driveway or cricket in the backyard. If we broke a window, all the kids scattered, so Mum had come out. We broke a window probably every once a month. So, but it was just, obviously I was the youngest of a pretty cricketing mad family. My father was a good cricketer in the eastern suburbs. Probably should have played better standard, but he was a policeman, so he sort of put all his professional life into that. And I had two older brothers and an older sister who were cricket mad, and my mum was the scorer for all the cricket teams. Did the lunches for most of the Nunawading Cricket Club. So I was just, you're sort of born into it, aren't you? And I think my brothers were throwing balls to me when I couldn't hardly walk, so it was just a natural progression. But we were just more club players. Billy was the middle brother, was probably the best player of a lot of us when we grew up. But I think it was just my passion and the want to succeed got me where I got, because I didn't play any representative cricket as a growing up, but I played some good junior cricket, but I was never in any rep side. So I think it was just my willingness to just try my hardest every time I went out in the middle, and it got me where I got. But I wouldn't have said I had a huge amount of talent, but I had a lot of want to be good. And I was around some good people on my journey, but my family were probably the biggest part, and they were probably my father and the Nunawading Cricket Club taught me the great parts of the game. What it means to be a team man, what it means. It's just not about you; it's about the whole group. So, very fond memories of the Nunawading Cricket Club and growing up in that area.
So juniors in the morning, and then go and watch Dad in the afternoon, which is what so many kids did growing up.
Yeah, 100%.
When did you start to play senior cricket?
Yeah, I didn't play senior cricket as much as some of the other kids in our. I think my mum and dad sort of just said it was maybe not that beneficial. I think I played my first senior game at about 15 or 16. I might have filled in occasionally, but a lot of other kids were playing at 12 and 13. They'd play the under-12s, under-14s and be playing seniors that day. But it wasn't for me. I played the juniors in the morning, went home for a quick lunch. That's when, Trevor and my dad would probably be having their lunch, and then I'd shoot off with them. Sometimes I go and watch Trev. Sometimes I go and watch my dad. But definitely at the start it was just watching my dad. And I can remember really going a long way back. They played at Silver Grove, which was right next to the Nunawading station. It's no longer there. I think it's the Nunawading netball or basketball court now. And then they moved to where Marnie's Road in Forest Hill, where the ground is now named after my father. But fond memories of watching a lot of cricket there. You grow up thinking that the Nunawading cricket first team were all like Dennis Lilly or Jeff Thompson. That they were my heroes. So it was, my progression through it. Then you look back, and Nunawading Cricket Club probably wasn't. But all at the same, it was good cricket. It was great to watch. I probably didn't watch every ball, but I watched when my father was batting, or there's certain players in the team that you sort of were drawn to. But it was a great cricket upbringing, being around that club.
So your dad, as you say, the oval is named after him, which is quite it's quite an accolade to have that. What was he? Was he a batter or a bowler, or
he's a batsman? He was probably top order batter. Captained a lot of the teams that were very successful in. You go back to the late 60s and 70s at Nunawading, they won a lot of premierships. I had some serious cricketers. My dad was captain at times. There was a guy called George Dolan who was a club legend and the league legend, opened the batting for that team. They had some good fast bowlers and some good spinners. So I think they won. I think it was them, Blackburn and Mitcham, maybe Forest Hill were up there a bit, but they were winning premierships every second year that I can remember. And they used to have Saturday nights because they didn't have bars, so it was like they used to go to people's houses for drinks, and the kids were all, you go back to people's houses, a few beers, and they're obviously not me, but the players would have a few beers and the kids would just play for a couple of hours. It was just a great time, great memories, and then they were very successful. And my brothers sort of got through into the senior ranks and I was going through the junior ranks, so that's watching them. And then Billy moved on to Hawthorn, and at times I'd go and watch him play at Hawthorn instead of my dad or my other brother. So, Saturdays was just cricket field. Tuesdays and Thursdays, if you're in the senior group, was training. Monday, I think it was Wednesday was junior training. I was just so excited to go to junior training, and then you just want Thursday and Friday to finish school and so you can play on Saturdays. And if it rained, it was like the worst day of your life.
That's right. Exactly. So you touched on your dad. Now, Bill was a very good player, and you said, went and played district cricket. You were the youngest. Did that help you from a competitiveness point of view to sort of keep up with your brothers? Is that was it the Saker family just a very competitive family?
Oh, they're all competitive in different ways. We're all competitive. I think I would say Trevor was the one that got the actual most out of his talent. He wasn't a hugely talented person, but he worked extremely hard on it. He was a passionate cricket person. Billy was very talented, but he was also quite a smart cricketer that got him a long way in district cricket. He probably should have stuck on with it for much longer, but I don't think he enjoyed the environments he was in. And then, growing up, I suppose I became a bowler because if you got out, you had to bowl to your brothers, and they were older and better, and I was younger, so I'd go into bat and probably face about 3 balls and I was out, so I'd have to bowl for the majority of the time. I think the only thing that I sort of worked on with my batting is when my brothers went around, I'd be out the back doing the old Don Bradman with the golf ball and against the garage wall and using a stump and batting by myself and making hundreds for Australia in my dreams. But like most kids would have, but I think I became more a bowler because I was bowling to them more than them bowling to me. But also wicket kept until I was about 16 or 17 as well. So, and then I had a bit of a spurt. But great fond memories. I think, Billy's experience of playing at Hawthorn helped me when I went to district cricket. There's no doubt about it. He sort of explained a few things, told me to make sure I tell everyone I'm an all-rounder instead of just a bowler, and I think that helped.
So take us through that journey, because as you said, no pathway program for you, no rep cricket, which I think is fantastic. And I mean that from the point of view that it should be a message to everybody. You don't have to be playing in the Victorian primary schools team like an Aaron Finch was to be able to be successful and be a first-class player. What was it like, and when did you start to get the feeling, I might be pretty good or good enough to make that advancement from a Nunawading situation, the Box Hill reporter, to go and play district cricket?
Yeah, I didn't really get the itch to play at a really high level until I was probably 20 or 21.
Right, okay.
I just woke up one day and said, I'm going to. Well, I had a couple of friends playing for Doncaster Cricket Club, which was in the sub-district competition. Just was a year before they become Fitzroy Doncaster, and they were sort of pushing me to come down to play with them, and I just thought that might be a good way just to see if I enjoy playing on turf wickets, and if it goes all right, I might move and have a go at district cricket. My brother's experiences at Hawthorn weren't great, so I wasn't. He always kept talking about how it wasn't a great environment to be in, and as I said earlier about the Nunawading Cricket Club taught you all the really good values of cricket, and I think Billy went to Hawthorn and he didn't sort of see that. In whatever it was, he just didn't get the same sort of buzz of playing for them as he would have Nunawading. So, I decided to go to Fitzroy Doncaster, and again, Billy's just urged me to go down as an all-rounder. And I was sort of more a batter then. I was a bowled some medium pace, and I went down to the first training session there, and I said, bugger this, I'm just going to try to bowl as fast as I can. I've never really tried it. I obviously did it to my brothers in the backyard or down the driveway, but I didn't. In a game, I got a bit scared of trying to bowl fast, so it was more about trying to be accurate. That's why it's a good coaching thing that I learnt, that if I get a kid that can bowl fast, I don't make them bowl slower to be accurate. I want them to bowl fast, and we can teach accuracy. And if you get kids bowling fast, make them bowl fast. If they miss in the pitch, and a lot of club coaches say, slow down, we just want to get on the stumps. Well, sorry, that's not for me. If you've got pace, try to use it. So I just went and bowled really fast at a training session. Neil Kilpatrick was the coach. He played a bit of district cricket, and he sort of said, you're pretty impressive. And we had some more training sessions, had a couple of practice games, and I remember walking out in the first. I got picked in the first team for Doncaster, so I was pretty happy. Wasn't thinking I'd get picked in the first team. So the first game, walked out, and Neil Kilpatrick throws me the new ball, which, I was quite nervous because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get it anywhere near the wicket, and went really well and had an unbelievable year with that club. Enjoyed every bit of it. The next year they became Fitzroy Doncaster, and this is quite an experience as well. It was when zoning was in.
Okay.
So I was zoned to Richmond, Hawthorn, Ringwood and Waverley. I got told, so I've done all the pre-season with Fitzroy Doncaster. Got told I'll probably play in the fourth or fifth for them, which I said, I don't think this is a merger. I think it's a bit more of a takeover. And but I got told on the Tuesday before the first game that I needed to get 4 clearances, and I didn't have time, obviously, to get 4 clearances in 3 or 4 days. So that Thursday night, I went down to Ringwood and trained with Ringwood, and they signed me off. I then went to Waverley, and Rodney Hogg was head coach of Waverley. He won't like this. He knows the story as well. So I walked up to Rodney Hogg and I said, Mr. Hogg, I'm David Saker. I'm here to get a clearance to play for Fitzroy Doncaster. And he grabbed the form off me. He said, stop wasting my time. And he signed it. And I just left. So that was the Thursday night. I went straight from there to Nunawading Cricket Club training. Trained with Nunawading, played with Nunawading on that weekend because I couldn't play for Fitzroy unless I played in the fifths, and I wasn't going to do that. And, the next week I went to Hawthorn training. They obviously knew me through my brother, and I trained with them, and they signed me off to leave. And then I went to Richmond on the Thursday night thinking it's my last signature to get. I'll be playing the fourth for Fitzroy Doncaster that weekend. And it was the only club that I turned up, and they knew I was coming. They sent me, they got me to bowl in the first net with all the first players. I bowled to Jeff Parker. I knocked him over a couple of times. I knew a couple of them from playing in an under-16 Eastern schools team. So Paul Rifle, Jamie Mitchell wasn't there, Gerard Clark, there was one other. There's another guy in that squad that was played in that team. So I knew a few people there, so I felt a little bit more comfortable. And Andrew Sincop was the chairman of selectors, and Jeff Hayne was the coach, and they came up to me and said, we'll play in the threes this weekend if you play with us. And I said, oh, playing with you guys then.
Right.
Played 2 games in the thirds, got 5 wickets, and probably both games ended up in the seconds, and I played first the back end of that season. And I was in and out of the first a bit because I think Paul Rifle, Paul Quinn, there's this guy's playing for Victorian, and they'd come back.
Yep.
I was in and out of the team for a bit, but that's how I ended up at Richmond. It was, it's quite an extraordinary sort of story, but had a really good time at Richmond Cricket Club.
So did you feel almost like a loyalty to them as a result of them saying, no, we believe in you, rather than, let's just get through this year and then I can assess my options at the end of that first season?
Yeah, it was more that the feeling at Fitzroy Doncaster. There was two other players that played in Doncaster first who were serious cricketers, and ended up in the fourth. I think the best standard that the Doncaster players played in were the threes, and I thought they're better than that.
Yeah.
They're at least seconds cricketers, and as I said, I think it was more a takeover than a merger. And I don't know if within a year, I don't think there's any Doncaster players there really. There was administrators, but not players. So that was more because I got a kick in the teeth there. I said, and Richmond at that time were probably one of the stronger clubs, and they just seemed to have a really good setup. They had, as I said, I turned up and they knew I was coming. They put me in the first net. Everyone made me feel welcome straight away, and that. I just said I'll play on the weekend. I had David Cowper as my captain in the threes. He was, a serious cricket person and great person to have leading you in a pretty nervous time, I suppose. But it was again great experience. And then Ray Bright took over the coach the next year, and I got on really well with him. And I was in and out of the first a little bit, but I think I played in the seconds premiership in my first year, which was pretty special.
Absolutely. So do you have a bit of a different perspective, having had that sort of the local cricket sort of upbringing and even playing a bit of subbies, that there's always been a bit of a stigma that, if you're playing, club cricket or you're playing subbies, that's not serious cricket, you've got to play premier cricket. Now, my experiences are that there's a hell of a lot of really good players that play club cricket that just don't want to play at the higher level. I mean, Dirk Nannis sort of was a bit like that before he ultimately had a crack at it. But there's so many examples of exceptional players that just want to play with their mates, or because of work they can't play higher than that. You've seen that.
Yeah, and I've been sometimes quite critical of those people, but I understand 100% that there's two things. They're really comfortable with where they're playing. A lot of times they're only doing it because they want to play with their friends, and they're not doing it to make a living, or they're not doing it to aspirations to play at a higher level. They're just doing it because they just enjoy the game and they enjoy the people they play with. So you can never knock that, and I'll never knock that, especially looking back in my career. My fondest memories are still probably my club moments, not my state moments, and not my coaching moments are probably more exciting than my playing moments, that's for sure. So I still have got much more fonder memories of premierships with Nunawading, Richmond and Northcote than I have of anything that I achieved for Victoria or Tasmania. So, and that's probably because I enjoyed the people I was with, and I enjoyed turning up every week. Not that I didn't with the state team, but there were times that it was tough for all different reasons. So I understand, and I always, we all mature differently as well. So the pathway system has its flaws, and it always has. So you just look at, and we're all fast bowlers, and we're all, been talked about it being quite loose, but Mick Lewis, Shane Ardwood, myself, Dirk Nannis, 4 of the, better bowlers that have played for Victoria, all didn't come into the system until they were 26, 27, but all had pretty big impact, and all other than myself had pretty good pace. So I thought I had as much pace as them, but I wish I did. But, it was just I just think you got to be really careful with the pathway. I watched the footy trade the other day, and I always think some of the VFL players that are playing could easily go in and make a way better impact than some kid. And with the kids, you're hoping. With a VFL player, you nearly got them ready made, but obviously they know better than I do. But I just think at that cricket level, you got to be really careful with your pathways, and just because you'll find the kid that's in the pathway at 15 is still in the pathway at 18, 19. And how is other kids haven't passed these guys? Like, surely. It's very rare that the group of kids that are 15 are still in the system at 18, 19. And again, fast bowling, and there's a good chance they're going to get more mature at 22, 23 and even older. So keeping an eye on them obviously important, but giving them every chance. So, as a coach, your fast bowling group, you've got to give way more time than some others, and it's a bit like leg spin bowling. You've got to give them way more time.
And you've lived it. So is this sort of slow burn theme continue, because you're in the sort of the state squad setup at about 24, but it took quite some time before you played first class cricket. How did that sort of move from district cricket, now Premier cricket, to state squad? How did that come about? Just through performances, or was it someone saw potential? How did that start off?
I think initially I performed really well for Richmond. We won we had a premiership year in 89, 90, I think it was. We had a serious team, Paul Rifle, Paul Quinn, myself, Jeff Parker, Paul Jackson, Ray Bright, Peter Davies, Gerard Clark. Gavin Holland was the keeper. He was the only one in the team that didn't play first class cricket. David Harris, Michael Quinn. It was a serious team, and we beat St Kilda by 3 runs in a grand final at the Junction. I had a really good season. I went overseas that year to play club cricket in just out of Manchester, and got a call. I got a message saying I'm in the state squad. So I was quite excited, but to be fair, after that year, I probably let myself down more than anything. I sort of probably didn't commit to it. Getting to and from training was a bit of a ball ache at different times, and when I got to training in the state system, it was like you were just a net bowler. There wasn't a lot of communication from them, so I just felt like when I turned up, never batted. I can't remember ever batting at state training, and I'd bowl for 2 hours and get flogged in the field. And I love fielding, I love bowling, but I felt like I was just there to service the other players. Hardly ever got talked to, and that's we had Ian Redpath and Keith Stackpole were the coaches, but I didn't enjoy it. I didn't do myself any favours. I missed training. So I sort of went off the rails a little bit in life as well. So it was direction that I didn't have a lot of direction as well. So I was doing different odd jobs. Didn't have any sort of consistency with off the field, so it made it really hard on the field. So then Ray Bright was I had another year at Richmond. Then Ray Bright was sacked or moved on from Richmond, and Northcote came knocking on the door. Again, I was no consistency with work. I was coaching football captain coach of a football team in country New South Wales, working on some farms up there. So I wasn't really, my cricket was sort of stagnating, and it wasn't good. And then I remember Rodney Hogg coming all the way to Hay, New South Wales to knock on my door and took me out for lunch with the Dr. J. And I can't remember if you know the legend president of Northcote. Fantastic man. He's passed away now, but he was just a legend of Northcote Cricket Club, and he just says, "You're coming to play for Northcote next year." I said, well, they offered me some money, and again, that stage I was probably in search of some money anyway, so I said, I'll and Ray Bright was just sacked as coach at Richmond. So I saw that as a challenge, another challenge. They'll go to Northcote, and they were a lower team, and they were sort of promising, a bit of leadership, bat a bit higher. By the time the season started, Rodney Hogg had given up because he bought a fruit and veg shop in Warrandyte. Mick O'Sullivan took over as coach. So when he took over as coach, I must admit, I said, well, I don't even know this Mick. I sort of signed a play under Rodney Hogg. And again, Rodney Hogg, one of legend of Australian cricket, was someone I wanted to play under. And I can remember, I reminded him of the day that he signed that clearance form. But then, I met Mick O'Sullivan. I would say that was the changing thing in my life. I just think that he just put me on the right direction. He gave me a good job, gave me consistency. I moved in with a guy called Steve Williams, moved away from my grassroots in Nunawading, which was a good thing for me. And I had some consistency in life, and my consistency then started to show up in cricket. Also had probably a big thing. I got rubbed out for 4 or 5 weeks late one of the years, and Mick O'Sullivan was pretty disappointed in me, and I obviously did the wrong thing on the cricket field. These days you probably would have got life for what I did. And I think that, again, was another turning point. So that was towards the end of a year. We had a decent year, but we've still finished probably mid-table. And the next year was the first year I probably really committed to a pre-season. I gave up football. I was a rugby and a football person, so I used to play rugby and football Saturdays and Sundays in the winter. And then, so this season was the first winter that I didn't play any football, and I just concentrated on cricket. Got myself really fit, and had, I think it was 26, 27 by then, and had a really good year. The club was having a good year, and then out of the blue, just after Christmas, Les Stillman rang me and said, you're coming to Adelaide on the weekend. And again, at the time, I thought it was one of my mates from Northcote taking the piss, and I said, are you sure? Because I wasn't even in the state squad. I'd got delisted the year after I talked about not being in a great space. So, I worked with a guy, another bowling coach at that time, Ian Callan, who was playing for Northcote, and he just got me to lengthen my run-up and just gave me a few things to think about in my bowling, and it just lengthened my run-up 4 or 5 steps, made an enormous difference. And then I got picked for that Victorian Games when we wore shorts. Walked out in the ground. I bowled the first ball. I think Paul Rifle and was playing, so I was still, how am I bowling the first ball when he's in the team? My first ball was to Darren Lehman. Shane Warne was at first slip, and Darren Lehman nicked it straight to him and he dropped it. So I couldn't get Darren Lehman out for the rest of my career. But that was, once I got in the team, it was just, again, a different. I played a few Shield games. I thought I was reasonably fit then. Played there was the last 2 Shield games, and I finished the season. I said, "Wow, I'm not fit enough to play 4-day cricket." And it was actually when you played 4-day cricket, and then the 5th day was the one day.
Yeah.
And that 5th day was like a killer. So again, then I was in the state squad the next year. Still wasn't contracts then. It was just if you played, you got paid, and so it was pretty cutthroat. If you wanted to stay in the team, you had to
perform.
Yeah.
So was it when you got that phone call from Les Stillman? What were you still thinking? I want to play cricket for Victoria. I want to play first class cricket, or had you almost given up on that thinking for a variety of reasons that you've explained?
Honestly, it wasn't on the radar, and obviously, after that call, it just sort of changed my perception of it a bit. Like I said, I'm a chance here, and I'd played against a lot of first-class players at club level, and I knew I could do it. And I actually thought I was better than a lot of guys that had bowled in first-class cricket that I played against. So I was confident I could do it. But again, as I said, the rigours of fast bowling in 4-day cricket, my second innings is in that year. I'd always have a good first innings, and then my second innings would drop off, and it was definitely, at the time I probably wasn't thinking that it's complete fitness, but when you look back, it was definitely the reason. And then I was lucky enough to be around Tony Doddermate and Paul Rifle, and just watching them go about their pre-seasons, and Damien Fleming was in the group then. Yeah, and you watch their pre-seasons and you think, I'm way off where some of those guys are at.
So what did you do? Because you said you've got a footy background. You've got to be fit to play footy and rugby.
Yeah.
But what did you go and seek someone out to get yourself fit, or was it something?
Well, that's when it just started to. It was just starting to become quite professional. So we ended up having, a fitness guy around. So we would be getting up at 6 a.m, going to sessions, and it wasn't compulsory, but it was. Most of the real professional players in our group, like, Dotty was just a ridiculously professional guy. And Dean Jones, if he was around, if he wasn't with the Australian team, they worked unbelievably hard. And they were the Australian players in our team. Obviously, Merv was coming to the end. Pistol was there, Damien Fleming, Darren Berry was the wicketkeeper. So there was the group of players were quite professional, so it was just sort of rubbed off on you a little bit, but still to this day, I probably didn't work as hard as some of the others, and I think that might have held me back playing for my country. But there's a lot of that stage of so many good players playing for Australia, so it was always tough to get into that group.
But it's tough to get in the Victorian team, particularly from a bowling point of view. You've just named some of the players that played for Victoria. A lot of those played for Australia. But when you're getting your opportunity, you're in your mid-20s, is it stars in the eyes sort of stuff, or because you're a bit older, a bit more sort of hard and seasoned as a person, let alone as an athlete, that it wasn't you weren't overawed necessarily going into that setup?
I was never overawed. I've been comfortable with every dressing room I've ever been in, so I was never going to be overawed. And the thing that I can remember bowling my first ball, and every time I went up a grade of cricket, when I was 10 years old to 12, I always remember facing my first ball or bowling my first ball. I had unbelievable fears that I had no idea where I was going to go. And when you got up to that state level, and that day that I played for Victoria and I get the new ball, when I marked my run up and looked down, I was petrified. But I bowled a ball that obviously was a decent ball. And it never, ever transpired. It was horrible. But I just remember the fears of every time I went up a level, it was, oh, my God, I don't want to be here. But it's gone within 2 balls. But the dressing room thing is never, no player has ever I was never ever scared to be in any type of dressing room. I felt like as I said, going back to my Nunawading days, I knew how dressing rooms were meant to be, and how you're meant to treat, respect the older players in the team. But I was never daunted by anyone that I played against or with at any stage, which I think held me in good.
I was going to say, did that help from an acceptance point of view from some of the older players that, Dean Jones, you can't get any more intimidating figure in Australian cricket probably at the time, particularly Victorian cricket. This guy's all right. He's not sort of scared sitting in the corner. He wants to be part of the team, even though he's relatively inexperienced.
Yeah, and I to Dino, and to be fair, not just Dino, but the group would have seen me as a little bit of a bogan from the eastern suburbs, and he's just coming in and he's just going to try to bowl fast. And I had quite a bit of bravado and bluff or aggression that was sometimes wrongly directed, but I think it was more my competitiveness. And I think Dino just looked at me and said, "This guy's just mad, like, we'll just let him go." And I had some really big run-ins with Dino through my career, but he never dropped me. And I would have definitely been someone he would have wanted to drop as a person, but I think he respected the way I played and he kept picking me. So, we went through in that little era with Les Stillman and Dino, they had their moments. Everyone in the team had different moments. It wasn't a great place to be. Everyone was sort of on edge. Quite a few people didn't get on well with Les, but I didn't. I found him a good coach, but there was a lot of people in that dressing room that didn't. Dino had falling outs with quite a few. He had a falling out with Darren Berry in the end, which they were really close at different times. So it wasn't a great dressing room to be in. And again, I'll go back to my Nunawading days. It was so foreign to see a dressing room like that.
So would you challenge the culture?
Well, I challenged Dino a couple of times, and I just challenged the way he talked to some of the younger players, but he wouldn't do that to me. And I was probably I'd only had 5 or 6 games under my belt. And I think that was because I'm 26, 27 at the time, and I just didn't. It didn't mean as much to me. It didn't mean as much to me because I think every game I played was a bonus at that age. Yep. So if I was 19 or 20, I reckon I would have been worse because you're at the start of it and you just hope you don't stuff it all up. But at 26, once I played one game, how good's this? And I still at that stage didn't have any aspirations of playing for Australia. If it happened, it happened. And so I had some run-ins with Dino, but I had run-ins with quite a few of the team at different times. It wasn't a great dressing room, that's for sure. And obviously listen to some of the podcasts, other players had shared that. But, I've played under so many different coaches and worked under so many different coaches. They all do it their own different ways. I always found that I got something out of every coach I played under. So I've learnt things that you shouldn't do as a coach, but also learnt things that were valuable to me as obviously a coach after I stopped playing. So, it wasn't a great environment to be in, that's for sure. It probably only changed a little bit when Warnie and Johnny Scholes took over. And that's no disrespect to Les. I think he'd lost the dressing room by the time I got in there. They'd won a Shield. They were a successful team, but I think things had changed, and that dressing room when I first got in it wasn't probably the dressing room it should have been.
So I had to double check this. You only played 6 seasons with Victoria. It felt like you were well over a decade of playing Victoria.
I was so old.
No, I just think you were just such a regular member of the team, and it was in that period. You talked about the volatility of the dressing room, but the Bushrangers as they were then, they were a big deal in Melbourne. They were a big sporting team. You talked about wearing the shorts and, Shane Warne, Dean Jones, Merv Hughes, Paul Rifle, the list goes on. I'm being unfair to some that I haven't mentioned. But only 6 seasons. It felt like longer than that. Do you look back on it and think you were part of it for longer than that?
Yeah, I probably haven't even thought about how long I played there.
Over 200 wickets.
I felt that it was longer than that. But, there was a couple of years I, enjoyed immensely with that team, but there was, be 3 or 4 that I probably didn't. So I never really reflect on my Victorian days, as I said earlier, that it was so special. We won some one-day championships. We never won the Sheffield Shield. We had teams that were probably good enough to do that, but we were a pretty fractured group. We had players playing maybe for the wrong reasons, playing for higher honours, or it just was never a really close-knit group. The only year I would say, I can't remember, you might have it there, but the John Scholes, Shane Warne, I think it was 97, 98 or 96, 97, they took over, and it was the only time I just loved turning up for Victoria. Warnie got the group playing in a way that only Warnie could. Everyone just jumped on his back, and we played some really good cricket. And then he went off and played for Australia, and we sort of lost our way a bit. And then Pistol took over the next year, and then Warnie sort of took a backward step, and it wasn't the same again. So, we had some reasonably successful seasons, but we never, tasting Sheffield Shield success was never there, so that would have been nice.
What were your memories of Shane Warne and the influence that he had on you, not only as a player, but as he's talked about in the dressing room culturally, but also that helped you become the coach that you ultimately became?
Oh, he's everyone's talked about him enough, but he's a one of a kind. Like, you'll never see anyone in sport like him. He was just so unique as a person, and as everyone keeps saying, he would give anyone the time of day. I remember he'd always talk to my mum. He'd always talk to members of our family as though they were important. So he's a special person. But my fondest memories that he was the number 11 batter in that St Kilda Richmond final. He didn't bowl the ball. He batted 11, and I remember Sean Graff talking to, Shane Warne would have been 19 or 20. Sean Graff made 100 in that final, and he was the last man out. I got Sean Graff out, by the way. And he said to Warne, he said, just don't play a shot, I'll get all the runs. And Paul Rifle was bowling from one end, I'm at second slip. And obviously, if you knew Shane Warne, everyone knew how good a cut shot he had. Paul Rifle bowled him 2 cut. And they needed 4 to win. Paul Rifle bowled him 2 cut shots, and you could tell he wanted to hit it. But you could hear Sean Graff's words in his ear, and he just let him go. And the next over, I got Sean Graff out, and we win the game by 3 runs. And, he was awesome to be around in the dressing room. When he became captain, he got the whole group behind him. As you can imagine, it was a little bit of a travesty. He never captained Australia. We all know probably the reasons why, but as a tactical captain and a person, he just played the game so aggressively. I was lucky enough to be with Ben Stokes this summer, and it was just listen to Ben talk about cricket and listening and seeing players just get on his back, and he just has come with me. It just reminded me so much of Warnie. So pretty special dressing room. They just remind me of each other so much, and they've got so many traits that are the same. We're taking the game on. Let's never take a backward step. And Warnie was lucky because he was so good, so it's easy to keep moving forward when you're so good. But even when he was under the pump at different times, when he always used to look at the positives and how am I going to take this game forward. Pretty unique human being.
There's no doubt about that. Why did you go to Tassie?
Well, money, pretty much.
Did you want to go, or
definitely not?
Yeah,
definitely not. I wanted to stay. The thing that really pissed me off that year is that I think I played all the Shield games that year, and I was asked by Scholesy at the time maybe have some rest at some of the one-day games, so we can hold you back for the Shield games because that's our biggest focus. I said, whatever's best for the team, there's no drama. Then it gets to contract time. Again, I'm over in England playing cricket. Graffy comes over and says, here's your contract. I said, I'm not signing that. It's crap. Oh, we can't grade you better because you didn't play one-day cricket. And I said, I didn't play one-day cricket because that was best for the team. If you were playing your best 11, I was playing in it. I said, I'm not signing that. And it came up to about a week before deadline. South Australia and Tasmania were sniffing around, and Greg Shipp, they just lost Mark Ridgway, Tasmania, and Greg Shippard was pretty keen on getting an older player that could lead the attack, and I got offered a 3-year deal at some pretty good money. There wasn't any, and I just went back to Victoria and said, well, if you can up yours by a bit, I don't want what they pay me, but I want to, and it just didn't happen. So, at the end of the day, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I then played under Greg Shippard and worked under Greg Shippard, met my wife, so pretty good times.
Absolutely. So going then back to Victoria, essentially did with Shippy as a bowling coach when Greg took over as coach of Victoria. Was it important to you to get back into the Victorian system, or was it more because Shippy wanted you? How did that sort of take place after your career finished?
Well, the coaching thing never really was on the radar, to be fair. I was playing for Tasmania. My second year of that contract, I got Player of the Year. We played in the Shield final. We had a really good team. We had a good season, and Shippy was sacked, which was surprising to a lot of us. And when a new coach comes in, if you're an older player, it's a pretty scary time. And I knew when Chippy left, and then they employed Brian McFadden, who's a Victorian. I had a feeling that I'd be on the outer. Tassie had a few younger bowlers coming through, but because I was player of the year, I thought, surely I'll start. But I could feel just in the whole pre-season, I had quite a few injuries through pre-season, and my experience of all the good years I had good pre-seasons. And I had a bad pre-season, and I was the wrong age to have a bad pre-season. And I also felt that I was on the outer, so we played the first Shield game, was here against Victoria, and Victoria made 600. We only got 3 or 4 wickets. Elliott made double, Armberger made 100. We got bowled out for 100 and 150. We only got 4 or 5 wickets, but I got 3 of them. I thought, I'll be right. Second game I got dropped and never played again. So, yeah, and that Christmas time that year, I sort of just went up to Brian McFadden and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. Obviously, if you need me to be around and it means that I get paid, I'll be around, but you're better off me not being around, because I wasn't helping the team. I was pretty bitter, so it was better to get me out of the system. And they just said, you don't have to turn up. So I played club cricket for the rest of the year and club land there. And then just towards the end of the season, I was making plans to come back to Victoria, go back to Mick O'Sullivan's company, do something, just go back to a normal play club cricket or wherever I play over here.
Back to a normal life.
Yeah, and Dennis Rogers was the president he's president of Tasmanian cricket, and he said, "What would you be keen on being one of the coaches next year?" And I'd never at any stage in my life thought I'd coach, and I said, "Have you run that past Brian McFadden?" And he said, "Not yet." He said, "But it doesn't matter. We want you and Dean Hills to become the batting and bowling coach next year." And that was Shane Watson was there then, and Shane and I got on really well, and I sort of took him under my wing for a few years, and he sort of talked to Dennis Rogers about, they need some coaches, and Sakes has been helping the young bowlers, so why don't we get him involved? So I said to my wife, well, let's have a look how it goes for a year if I enjoy coaching. So I coached. I think it wouldn't have been something that Brian McFadden wanted, but it was forced on him. We got on quite well. We coached there for a year. That was obviously the year that David Hooks died, which was a tragedy, and then Greg took over, and then Greg got me back the next year. And then I suppose I've been coaching ever since. But I was so fortunate for Greg, again, going into the Victorian system with some of the bowlers that they had. We had a remarkable cricket team, and Greg was a big part on getting a great group of players together, good crop of fast bowlers, and there's no doubt that helped me move on as a coach.
You mentioned helping Shane Watson when you were still playing, and you did that even at Victoria. But as you sort of emerged as a bowling coach, the likes of Peter Siddle, Clint Mackay, who went on and played for Australia, there's others as well that you essentially shaped. James Pattinson was part of all of that. Did you know that you were going to be good at it?
No.
And what makes you good at it?
To be fair, if I look back, looking back what I know now about coaching when I started, I was poor. But coaching back then was quite new.
It was.
So there wasn't the coaches when I went through the Victorian system was the players you played with. You only learnt from the players you're playing with. But how do you hold that? How do you do that? And they still do that. And I reckon the really good teams do that better than any. But the bowling coach is just good there to spark different conversations. And I suppose when I first coached, I was a little bit I rode the game a little bit too much. Like, why did you bowl there? What did you do? But on reflection of when you played, you didn't do everything perfect. So you just got to wind it back and just say, look, they're trying their hardest. They're trying to give you everything they got. So you're just trying to make the game a bit more simpler for them and give them ideas. And the great thing about coaching at a high level, the technique's usually pretty good. And if you tinker with it too much, it's probably a disaster anyway. So, I'll always go back to my best coaching days are when I coach kids that can hardly jump off the wrong foot, or they can hardly bowl. Then you have to coach. Coaching Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad, bloody hell, that's how he's that. Pat Cummins, I've got the best product in the world. What do I tell them?
So that's what I wanted to ask you about, because we often think of batting coaching gurus that can get the best out of batsmen. Bowling gurus we don't speak about them as much. But when we talk about you've had 2 stints coaching the England bowlers, very different ball conditions to also then coaching the Australian players, but then the Victorian players as well. So what are you saying to them? I mean, you sort of touched on it then, but I would imagine that to play for Australia or to play for England or to play Victoria, you kind of got to know what you're doing as a starting point. How do you get them to be better? Is it more challenging their ideas? Is it a skill thing, teaching them bowl an in-swing and they only bowl outswingers, or a slower ball? I'm fascinated to know the sort of things that you're doing because we've seen these players improve under your tutelage.
Yeah, it's a mixture of all of those things to a degree. But it's the first thing. The first thing about coaching is, one, you get a relationship, so that they trust you and they trust what you say. So I've been fortunate enough to probably work in some environments that, I was trusted pretty quickly. And in the Victorian system, under Shippy, I think I was really respected as a player. So it was straight away, we'll listen to him, whether I was right or wrong. My journey now is, particularly in the last 5 to 6 years, it's about obviously the relationship, but it's about what's you as an identity as a bowler. So I can just remember my first conversation with Jimmy Anderson the first time I was with him, and I said, how do you see yourself as a fast bowler? Because what I see, I don't reckon is the same as what you see. So tell me, what are you? Are you a skillful swing bowler or are you a fast bowler? And he sort of looked at me as though, I don't know. And it was a great conversation. We had some big arguments when we first started, but I think that's why we end up quite close now. But I said, I see you getting cut a lot. You know who gets cut? Really fast bowlers, not skillful bowlers. So for the next 12 months, let's just stop getting cut. And you're never going to be as quick as the others. So you got to start working that out. If you're not accurate, you won't survive in Test cricket. You're the most skillful bowler he is the most skillful bowler I've ever worked with. And I think it just made him go, well, that's how I've got to be. And he found his identity as that. And, your identity does evolve in time. The better bowler you become, your identity becomes quite bigger. And it's the same as a batter. What's your identity? And I talk a lot. The team have an identity and individual players have identities. And my, the work is that, Peter Siddle, when he first started, was fast. But now his whole identity has completely changed.
No doubt.
I can remember his first ball in Test cricket, he had Gambia in the head. He couldn't hit anyone in the head now in Test cricket, but he could still get wickets if he played on the certain surfaces. But he's found different ways to evolve as a bowler, and that's the first thing I talk to every bowler that I haven't worked with is, how do you see yourself?
So Peter Siddle was one I desperately wanted to talk to you about, because having covered Victorian cricket for a long time, he was the firebrand pace bowler that just come in and bowl as fast as he could, and he was quick. To then see him, not even just here back at Victoria now, but towards the end of his Victorian time, I wouldn't call him a medium pacer, but I call him a very crafty, clever bowler. Does that does that get coached, or is that something that the player themselves has to work that out as their career evolves to be successful, but also, I guess, to stay in the game as long as possible?
I think there's a bit of both in that as well. Sid's is probably one of my most favourite players I've ever coached, because he's he started the way he is and now has ended up
that's
the
right.
way he is. And he's also an unbelievable team person. So
Yes.
you won't get anyone talking negative that's played with him. And if they do, I'd be questioning that person more than I'd be questioning Peter Siddle. There's that sort of person is quite rare in a dressing room. Like, if you talk to everyone that played with me, you'll get a 50-50 split probably. But with Sids, you'll get a huge amount of numbers in his favour. So straight away, you just know that he's a good person and a good person to have in your group. And his journey's been amazing. Like when his first game for Australia, I remember watching it, was a pretty proud moment because it had so much to do with him. But then he got the hat trick against England in that Ashes when I was coach of England, and I was in one hand I'm going, I'm so happy for him, but then I'm going, Jesus, we didn't need this. But he's a special person to be involved with because of he's still playing, and it's amazing that this year I'm back coaching the same guy, and he's in the nets bowling yesterday, and I'm pinching myself going, I'm still working with him, and the same as the Ashes just gone, I'm working with Stuart and Jimmy again. Like, it's an incredible journey.
I want to ask you about England, but the one person that I get emotional and frustrated and all sorts of different emotions come in talking and thinking about James Pattinson, about what he could have been. You got to work with him as well, and you were very public at times, really defending him, and at times you're questioning him publicly as well to try and get the best out of him. When you look back on him, what could have he been, but also what was he? It's a tough question.
On his day, he was as good a bowler as ever played the game.
And that's a big rap, but you're not the only one that would say something like that.
No, you just have to watch some of his spells. Like 140 kilometre-hour outswingers with a hell of a bouncer, and probably, at that level, everyone's a competitor. There's no doubt about that. And it's not the way you show it, but he was aggressive competitor. He's a quintessential fast bowler. Like, he was so aggressive, and he wanted to win so bad for his team, and he went over the line a few times with that. But again, I see myself in things like that and players like that, so I can relate with people like that. So, his injuries were cruel, and unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast. If you're going to bowl over 140, it's very rare that you're going to stay in the park for the amount of time, that long a time. So he had a terrible run with injuries. His obviously body and his back wasn't built to do what he was doing, but he went through some bad times, dark times because of injuries, but he kept bouncing back. And I think at the back end, and I'm really still a bit not upset, but disappointed he chucked it in when he did, because I think he still had plenty to offer. But he's the only one that can answer exactly why. But I had a couple of conversations towards the end. I said, "Don't do it. Like, you just don't know. You just keep persevering with it." And unfortunately, straight after that announcement of international cricket, I think the hunger of the game went out of him as well. So he wanted to be the next Peter Siddle that can just drop his pace and be a skillful. But to do that, you got to spend some time on it. And I'm not sure he was. I'm not sure he was that sort of person that I'm going to spend way more time just trying to be a more skillful bowler, because he wants to bowl fast. So where Sid sort of knew that my pace isn't gone, so I've got to do something else. It's a shame. It was a great loss for Australian cricket, but as I said, on his day, he was as good as anyone.
So with working with Jimmy and Stuart Broad and even Mark Wood, just the sheer pace, I was lucky enough to be at Headingley to see that opening spell, which is something I'll never forget. Just to see the likes of Usman and Marnus and Steve Smith genuinely
scared.
Well, that's what it looked. I'm not going to say it was, but that's what it looked. Oh, let's just say rushed, alert.
Well,
it was. But what's it like with those guys? The experience, and you're coaching them. You're looking after them.
Yeah, and again, once you're at that level, it's just more about making sure they're just on top of their game, what they need, and believe it or not, Jimmy needs reassurance. He needs keeping up. Stuart not so much, but Jimmy's the greatest fast bowler on wicket ever, but he's still got some insecurities, and that is still to me that's a great thing, and I think that's what keeps him going. I think if he ever loses that, I think he might chuck it in. But
a lot of professional athletes are like that.
Yeah, and that's why they're so wired differently, and they can be hard work. Like Jimmy's the hardest person I've ever worked with, but away from cricket, he's the nicest guy in the world. He's one of the most generous, good friends that I've got. But even this year, in the build-up to games and on game day, we would have some real good arguments. But
what about?
I just say, stay away from me, David. You're getting in my space. I want to have a conversation. I don't want to have a conversation with you this morning. Or he's just a different beast. If you come up to him in a break and suggest something, some days he'd be so open to it. Some other days it'd be just, I don't want to talk to you today. But it wasn't just me. It was the whole, if another player came into his space, especially a batter, when he's in the wrong, he let him know. But, he's a different beast, and I think it's a lot of that is his insecurities. But his insecurities make him work harder, I think, and it makes him hungrier for success. And, they're easy to work with, Stewie, and if you understood them, they're really easy to work with because they're just, at that stage of their careers, they've got everything down pat with their actions, with it's just making sure that they're on top of their mental game, really. And Mark Wood, I'm catching him it's so scary. And I'm 50 yards back, so I can only imagine. And all batters, regardless of what they say, once a guy bowls 150, they're scared. And why wouldn't you be? But it's how you deal with it. And Mitch Marsh didn't look scared, did he?
No, he did not.
But, I've been lucky. Jimmy and Stuart, it's lucky I can call them friends as well as guys I've worked with.
So him bowling around the wicket to David Warner, Stuart Broad, this is, to left-handers in general, is that something that he comes up with and says to you, look, I've got something here I reckon I'm looking at and thinking about, or is that you going to him and saying, because cricket's ultimately a game of problem solving, whether you're a batsman or a bowler. Who's instigating or initiating those sorts of changes?
Well, it probably came up in the 2013 Ashes in England. I think Warner was going okay in that series, and Stuart, I think, decided to go around the wicket. And if you can stand the ball up to any left-hander from around the wicket, you're going to be a handful. And that's when Stuart was just starting to do that, and he only got better at that. So I think he got him out at Durham on the first time he did go around the wicket, and Australia were going really well at it. I think it was a tea break. And we talked a bit about how we're going to get Warner out, and we want him to hit the ball straight down the ground, which was usually a tactic. And he said, I'm going to go around the wicket and tack the stumps a bit more. And he bowled him out probably the first or second over after the break. And then we got 5 for 20. Peter Siddle was the last man out, caught it mid-off. And the crowd actually got hugely involved at Durham, and Stuart bowled one of the great spells after that. But I think that was the first time he got him out around the wicket. And then it was just... You go back to that spell at Nottingham when he got 8 for 7 for 12 or something like that. But a lot of going around the wicket's also what you can actually do with the ball. If you can't actually get the ball to go away from around the wicket, it's probably not worth it. Unless it's like a low and slow wicket, so you're looking for LBWs a bit more. But tactically, it's just what you can do with the ball, whether you go over or around the wicket. Some bowlers really don't like going around the wicket, so I always try and encourage Chris Wokes to do it, but he doesn't like doing it. He's got a good record over the wicket, so he just keeps saying, I would rather go over the wicket. But a lot of that's personal choice. But these days with tactics, they get so much information from the analysts. So that part of the game's changed quite a bit for the coaches, because it used to be. I can remember my first Ashes tour, 2010-11 here. Most of the tactics was up to me, but now they get so much you don't even have to really. At training days, you're just going through how do you think you're getting him out. Well, I looked at the footage last night, but again, there's not a lot of secrets anymore, and especially Australia and England. Yeah. Like Jimmy knows the opposition, they know him. Yeah, you could tell David Warner what's Stuart Broad going to do. He'd tell you straight away, and that goes back to that identity.
I love that. That's awesome. I love that. It's fascinating. A couple more questions. I'm conscious of time, and I could talk to you forever. One more on the bowling. What's the hardest ball for a fast bowler to bowl?
Probably.
Or is it totally dependent on your action?
Well, it does depend on. Like the Yorker is probably one of the hardest balls to bowl. And I'm always intrigued where commentators are up in the coach's box and just last ball of a game, a white ball game, obviously. Just bowl a Yorker, you can't get it for 6. Yeah, it's not that easy because particularly in these days, if you miss either side, particularly if you miss to your side, it's a 6. If you miss full, could be a 6. And if you nail it these days, you can get it over the keeper's head for 6. So, and you got to remember when we train, again, these days, this day and age, there's S&Cs and medical staff saying you can only bowl so many balls, which we can have that argument another time as well. But a batter can face thousands of balls at training. A bowler can bowl 60 balls, and that's a big session for a bowler. How many Yorkers is he bowling? So, particularly in our group at the moment, I'd rather upskill on the Yorkers and upskill on the slow balls, because most first-class bowlers or test bowlers can bowl a good length ball with their eyes closed. And if they can't, I don't know why they're playing first-class cricket. So a lot of our work these days is you do a lot of block work on bowling Yorkers and slow balls, but if you've got a red ball in your hand, probably the hardest ball to bowl is taking the ball away from a left-hander from around the wicket. 2 reasons why. It's a hard ball to bowl, but it's also a lethal ball. So if you can have it in your armoury, it's really good, but the angle makes it hard for you to take the ball away. Swinging. If you can swing the ball both ways, you're a very skillful bowler, and if you can do it with not giving too many clues away. Where Jimmy's, if I'm catching Jimmy, I know as he releases what it's going to be, but 90% of the batters he bowls to wouldn't know which way it's going. The real good ones probably, but that's an amazing art. The guys that can swing it without changing their action very much. The art of swing bowling's, if you get a good coach, they can help you a lot. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And there's so many different views on it. So the way I would coach it isn't always the way others would coach it, but I've had some good success with it. So I think I'm doing the right thing. But again, swing bowling's drifted out of the game a little bit.
Yeah, it has.
Because I think the batters cope with it really well and they see it. Once they see the seam, I reckon they're comfortable. When they see the wobble, they're not sure what's going on. And it's English conditions in particular. Sometimes the wobble's the most dangerous. And, if you watch Paddy and Josh bowl, hardly bowl a seam up ball, do they? So they've sort of embraced that into their game.
I said only a couple more questions, but you've now got me on to another one. That wobble seam, is that something that was always around that's just seen differently now, or is that genuinely a new delivery that wasn't in the armoury of a David Saker coming through all those years ago, or bowlers, pre and post that time?
If anyone says it was in the game from the 80s, he's got their head right in the stand. It was never talked about ever when my playing days. And there's no doubt bowlers bowled it with a wobble seam, but they didn't know though.
When they get it wrong.
But these days, there's a lot of work put into it, and there's a lot of different grips and a lot of different theories on it. I just remember the year that the Pakistan bowler that got done for... This is killing me. He played for Delhi Daredevils. A tall, fast bowler. He played for Pakistan against England one year. I'll get his name in a minute. Mohammad Asif. Yeah, Mohammad Asif.
Oh, yeah.
Tall, really talented fast bowler,
Yeah.
good pace. But we played against... England played Pakistan, and he had an unbelievable series against us. I was in England, and this again, being Jimmy, he said, "Sakes, give me some footage, slow motion footage of him bowling." So we sat down and watched it, and he goes, "See his fingers? See, they're off the seam, and this is how he's letting it go. I reckon I can bowl that." And that was between that series and the next series, which we had maybe 2 months. I think it might have been the 10, 11 Ashes. He worked unbelievably hard on it, and then we got to the 10,000, 10, 11 Ashes. He says, "I reckon I got it." And then we obviously got cameras, the fast cameras, to see if that's coming out, and it worked beautifully. And I said, "You're bloody genius to do it that quickly." And I think it was just people started talking about it, commentators, and then everyone just looked at the grips, and it's not one size fits all. And this is one thing about coaching as well. Batting and bowling is never one size fits all. It's what's best for that player. Everyone says, "What's the best action?" Well, there's a lot of good actions. There's a lot of fast. How do you bowl fast? There's so many different reasons why that. Some was just a God-given blessed. Some it's just their action is just the perfect one. But yeah, Jimmy just worked on it, got this wobble going, and I think it's just become a big part of world cricket. And there's not many sides that bowl a lot of seam up these days. But there's still a room for it because Mohammed Shami is probably the one that stands out as the guy that stands the seam up so well, and makes swing bowling look beautiful again.
Now, you're in a Renegades cap and shirt today because you're back coaching the Renegades again. It's your second go at it. You also got to coach Victoria. Very small window that you coached Victoria very successfully to a title. That's as a holistic coach as opposed to a bowling coach. How satisfying is that to coach your own team as opposed to just a group within the team?
Yeah, well, to be fair, coaching a state team is a lot different than coaching a franchise team. With the state team, you're invested in time, and you'll work with the younger players in a state system is so crucial because and at that stage when I took over, I didn't think I'd be working with Australia a year later. It was just I'm here with Victoria for 4 or 5 years, and so you're actually working on a group that's going to be good in 3 to 4 years, and obviously you're still thinking about here and now. So we were lucky then; we had a really good experienced team, so I didn't have to spend a lot of time with the senior players. They're very self-sufficient. And franchise cricket, it's you get them in. Again, this identity, this is the way I want us to play. This is your identity as players. Most of them as identity as players, it's their own words. It's not me. This is how I see you. How do you see you? And then you come up with a way you want to play as a group, and then you go for it. You're not investing a lot of time into the future. It's here and now. Where a coach of a state team or the Australian team, or you've got a bigger picture further down the track. Where franchise cricket's it's here and now. It's 6 weeks and then you're gone. And again, most important conversations I have with the group will be with Jake and Mackenzie Harvey, and I love them to death, and I think they've got some serious talent. So they need this in our group. They need a lot of guidance, and some of our younger bowlers might need some guidance. But what am I telling Quinton de Kock? What am I telling Aaron Finch? They know how to play the game. My conversation with them is just, how's life going? Like, how's your family? So my time here is more with them and tactically how we're going to beat oppositions. But I think franchise cricket, to me, is not really coaching. It's management.
Yep.
Where state coaching is really important. I love the thought of you coaching a group for 4 or 5 years in a Shield group. I think that's exciting, but franchise cricket, wouldn't say it's easier, but it's a much more comfortable gig, and you're not dealing with parents or anything like that, are you?
So you love a Victorian cricket. How could you define, is the last question, how would you define Victorian cricket and what it's meant to you, I guess, over a long period of time as a player and as a coach in various different roles?
Well, I've got no doubt I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if it wasn't for Victorian cricket. There's obviously got to come on it with the estate player, but just the people I've met through my journey, I think, have now shaped me as where I'm at. So, guys like Michael O'Sullivan at Northcote Cricket Club, Greg Shippard, they're the people that have made me what I've become. And obviously there's some players around, as you mentioned, the group of fast bowlers I had with the Victorians, and you missed quite a lot of guys, but you mentioned Siddle, Pattinson, Clinton Mackay, John Hastings, Jared Denton, Mick Lewis, Shane Howard.
They're in trouble. You're naming them. You're going to get them all now.
But we just had so many. And Greg, as a head coach, knew that to win Sheffield Shields, he needed lots of fast bowlers.
Especially at the MCG.
Yeah, and we proved that. I don't know if I backed Dirk Nannis up. There's another one. So we just had a great group of fast bowlers. We also had, obviously, Shane Moore and Bryce McGowan, Johnny Holland. So they always had a decent spinner in their team. Yeah, and there's some serious batters. So, that era with Greg Shippard, and then he got me into the Delhi Daredevils, where I met some international players. I met Paul Collingwood. Paul Collingwood put my name forward to the England job. Went for an interview with the English job. Flew myself over. They were going to do it by Skype, and I said, "There's no way that I could do that." Got the English job, and again, then you start meeting different people. I'm meeting people in England and seeing the way English people coach. Andy Flower coach, different English coaches. Made me look at the game a bit differently, because Australians think they're the best coaches, and they're fair enough. But then you go over there and the English think they're the best coaches. And I've been lucky. I worked in Sri Lanka, I worked in US cricket, worked in little different franchises here and there. So I've been lucky, and I've been around some really good people. So I think a lot of it's timing as well. I talk about luck, but I've been lucky to be in the right place at the right time a couple of times, that then gets you noticed. And you don't survive in the industry if that's the only thing you got. But I think working with some good players that then spruiked me up a bit and helps.
Goes down to trust, I reckon. I reckon it's a big word.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming in. Really appreciate it. When you said that you were happy to do it, I was so excited, because you're a great story, and you've got great stories. And I think particularly even going all the way back to the Nunningwadden Cricket Club with your family, it's such a great starting point for a career. And I think there's lessons in that for everybody. Good luck for the Renegades for the year.
Thank you.
And I won't say too much luck when it comes to England cricket, but when it comes to the Renegades over the summer, I hope it all goes well.
No worries.
David Saker joining us on the Vic State Cricket Podcast. What a story, and what great stories he shared with us today. We'll catch you next time.